Special guest time, and so pleased to be able to welcome this young man back. And I have to say he's a young man because he's actually younger than me, just. It's Graeme Clark from Wet, Wet, Wet. Graeme, good morning. Welcome back. Lovely to see you.
And nice to see you, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
You're looking well. I trust that looks aren't being deceiving.
I hope not. No, listen, I'm feeling good. It's always nice to come and speak about something you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to people. So yeah, no, listen, it's all good here. There's no sharp pains when I breathe in. So as long as that's happening, then we're all good.
Exactly. Now you've got an intimate acoustic tour, as you're calling it. It's obviously coming to the Queen's Theatre in Barnstaple in just a few weeks' time. What made you decide that now would be a great time to do an acoustic one? Because obviously it's taking you to venues you wouldn't normally get to as well, isn't it?
Well, that's right. I mean, but there's a couple of reasons, and one reason I'll start with. We've been out as a band for years and years and years, and it's sort of the big sort of entourage, the big bombast, the let's knock 'em dead and let's hit them between the eyes with the music, and in the middle of those sets we would usually strip it back and play sort of 5-10 minutes of acoustic driven music, and it's something that I really like, because that's the essence of being a musician. That is where the songs are kind of, the kernels, the sort of acorns of the music is born. Believe it or not, in our teenage bedroom, we sat there with acoustic guitar and figured it out. We kind of worked things out there, and I think it's always one thing, isn't it, that although you're trying to get out there and you're going all over the world and you're playing all these songs and you're doing all that, there's an essence of you that always kind of reverts back to where it starts, and that's where we are. We did the Strings Attached album, and in the back of my mind there was always the idea that wouldn't it be great to take this on the road, to go to places that we don't normally go to. Ultimately, there's a bit of let's just change it up a bit, because otherwise it just turns into Groundhog every day, and every day becomes this, where are we? I don't even know. I can't remember. We've been in, especially if you're doing back to back and sort of long tours. Listen, I love touring, don't get me wrong. I enjoy every aspect of it, from the catering to the sound check, all these things that go with putting a gig on. I love it. I love it all, but it's nice to change it up as well, and so to bring it back to where it started, where you're trying to bring people into the place where you created the songs in the first place. Like, so we would all be in our bedrooms and we'd all be kind of working it out and figuring it out, and really that's what you're doing. We've got this chance that we can people will come and see us. It's a small, intimate environment. It's a different thing from going to the theatre shows of 1,000 people, or the arena shows, or even festivals or anything like that. It's completely different. It's turning the dynamic on its head. It's stripping it back. It's letting the songs kind of breathe and be shown in a different light. And, by doing the album, some songs can take that sort of treatment. Some songs can't, because they need the big production. You know what I mean? They need the Trevor Horn sort of songs and whistles and bells and all that to go to make it that thing that it's been created for. I think it's a nice experiment on the test of a well-written song, is to kind of pick up the guitar and can you play it like that, and put it across in 3.5 minutes. So, some lend themselves to have that treatment kind of pretty automatically. Others you need to kind of bend and sort of shape it in a different way. But that was the interesting part about doing the album. And so from that kind of initial, let's create an album like that, the idea in my mind was always to let's try and take this out and tour. Much to my manager's consternation of, is this going to be expensive, Graeme? But to me, it's not. It's adding a value to Wet, Wet, and doing something that sort of, it's a departure away from and not such a huge departure. It's just presenting it in a stripped back way that people, I think, are ready for, you know. And for me, when I go to a concert, if I've got the choice of going to see a band that I know and love, sure, I might go and see it. If I've got a chance to go and see a band I love doing something that they don't normally do, that would be something that appeals to me, and and the hope is that that's the way people will feel about this as well. So that's, in a roundabout way, the conversation of the acoustic tour, and how it came about, and how we want to kind of, you know, go out there and sort of change the dynamic a little bit.
And I can imagine actually that some of the songs, when done acoustically, it adds a completely different dimension to the original produced version in the studio that we all know, because we'll still know the song. But actually, sometimes it can bring out a bit more of the I don't know, the hidden soul of a song, if that makes sense.
Well, that's it. I mean, you know, let's dig into that and drill into it a little bit more. You know, I believe that songs have a conscience, right? And I think that, you know, all you, and it's crazy, right? I saw a clip of Paul McCartney saying, you know, these are just tones, you know, but you put them together in an organised way, and then suddenly you have this song. And so it's a crazy thing to say, you know, oh, a song has a conscience, but that's what I think people connect with. It's not necessarily the obvious thing, which is, what is this guy saying to me? What are these songs saying to me, and how do I relate to them in my own life? You know, there's something more. There's almost like, and I'm loath to go down this hippy dippy kind of route, but you know, it's like sort of connection inside you that connects with the song, you know, and that to me is everything. You know, we can boil it down and say, no, this song's about that, and people go, oh, I like that. That's a great idea for a song, and so I'll listen to it now, and I'll kind of view it quite differently. But ultimately, in order to get in there, it has to go inside you and sort of have this sort of connection. Then that's how I kind of absorbed my music when I was a young kid. I knew nothing about spirituality or anything like that, but music went into my psyche, and I felt something. And for me, I think as a musician, that's all I've been trying to do. I could never articulate it when I was 16 or 17, but now that we've analysed it to death, man, we can actually kind of say, well, you know, people connect with songs in sort of funny ways. Usually the band are the last people to know how good things are. And I sort of spoke to you at the beginning about the Beatles and me saying, I don't think they knew how good they were. You know, when you hear them talking about music, you know, they didn't know, you know, the passage of time hadn't happened. So there was no context to gauge it on, you know. Only through the 40, 50 years that have passed have we realised, God, they created some kind of gargantuan kind of pieces of music that what has happened is it's connected with every single generation that eventually came up and through the Beatles music. And so I think, you know, what I'm trying to say is that's what we were trying to do, whether we knew it or not. You were trying to create something that would go out there and connect with people, and that, as a musician, is everything. You know, if you create something that connects with someone, it doesn't matter on what level. If it's a connection, then I've done my job then, you know, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to kind of sort of engage people with our with all the tones that we're creating, you know, and it's a simplistic thing, but it's a deceptively difficult thing to do, which is why we revert back to the Beatles and go, they didn't know what they were doing, you know. Otherwise, if they'd said, look, this is going to connect with people for the next 50 years, they would have thought completely differently about it, you know. And so in terms of that, there's a lot going on in music all the time. But I think if you can, what is that Groucho Marx phrase, you know, or if you can fake authenticity, man, you've got it made, you know. And I think there's an element of truth in that in all walks of life, you know. If you can somehow make it seem simple and make it feel authentic, then I think people kind of relate to that in a way that goes beyond their understanding. It's something to do with inside and how it affects your heart. So, you know, I know it's early in the morning, man, and we've just suddenly talked about things inside us and spiritually feeling the music. I think that's what it's about,
Yeah,
though.
but it's I get exactly what you mean because as a child, I mean, I was 11 when I decided that the radio was what I wanted to do. I have actually spoken to the person concerned since, and he was quite taken aback by it, which actually reinforces something you were saying. I was listening
Yeah.
to Radio Luxembourg, like we used to do of an evening. I was supposed to be asleep in my bed, but I was, under the blankets. I had my little blue plastic transistor radio with one little earpiece plugged in, and I was listening to, excuse me, I was listening to Tony Prince on Radio Luxembourg, who had his hot hit of the week, as they all did back then, trying to sound very American, weren't they? And he played this track, and it was Justin Hayward and John Lodge, blue guitar.
Yeah.
And I had never, the intro, it's almost about a 90-second intro, I think.
Yeah.
I'd never heard anything like it in my 11 years. And I was just completely blown away by it.
Yeah.
And I went into school the following day to tell my friends about it, and suddenly realized that actually, how do you describe to somebody the feeling of a song if they can't hear that song?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was actually what made me sit down and go, well, hold on, that can't be the only song that's like this. I need to find a way of being able to get people to understand what I'm talking about. And that was kind of what started me on the road to where I am now. And I told Justin that story some years ago now, but he was quite taken aback by it. He didn't think that his songs would ever have that kind of impact on somebody. But as a little 11-year-old, listening away to that, it genuinely just blew me away. And I'm sure that songs that you have recorded have had that effect on people as well. Whether we're talking about one of the ballads like Goodnight Girl or something, or whether we're talking about a completely different track. If it's had that effect, you may never know that. So.
No, and I'm lucky enough that I've been around long enough that I have experienced not dissimilar to what you explained with Justin Hayward and blue guitar, where songs that that's the beauty of this. I think you never know. No. You never know what is going to connect with people, and you never know how it's going to connect with people. And so, a case in point is Love Is All Around, which is obviously the one song that people will know us by. I mean, I'm happy that that's the case. I also understand that, we're lucky that we have a history that we can sort of point to as well as saying, yeah, that's good, but this is also good as well. And so in terms of that, we did that song because we get asked to be part of that movie, and it was the Trogs, Love Is All Around. I had no history with the song. I didn't really know the song.
No.
We had, just this sort of recycled piece of another song that sort of, that'll work at the beginning of it, and then it took it into a different key than the original. So of course suddenly it's in a different key, so there's a different colour to it, and suddenly it's like this door is opened and we're away through it, and we're like, where are we going here? It's almost like you're sort of, you're not driving the car, you're sort of in the car being driven by this sort of force.
Passenger in some cases. Yeah.
In terms of that, we thought, oh, that's a nice song. That's turned out quite good after 8 hours of kind of putting it together, and we thought, oh, that'll make a nice B-side, and never thought that much about it until it goes to somebody else and they come back, and it was people like my father-in-law came back and says, oh, I think this is the best thing you've ever done. And my father-in-law never spoke about our music. So, of course, you're like, there you go. Right away, I'm getting different kind of, people just absorbing the music differently than they would normally do. But that is a similar thing as the 11-year-old boy. Weirdly, I too started with the transistor under the covers, kind of listening. Oh, this is interesting. This is kind of new. Weirdly, last night I'm in listening to a podcast and a song comes on. I'm just about to go to sleep, and suddenly it's triggered everything in my brain, and then I'm like, oh, and my mind's focused now because it's music and because it's kind of connecting with me, So, that hasn't ever left me.
No.
Much as it, to my consternation, I'm like, I better put this down, because if I don't take this out my ear, I'm going to be up all night, because the
Yeah.
music's got a hold of me and it's entered into the spirit of me, you know what I mean? So, that's something that happened when I would have been young as well. I had two older brothers who were absorbing music all the time. So it was around me whether I wanted it or not, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
something that goes in. I would have been 6 or 7 when I was hearing sort of different types of music that I wouldn't usually been exposed to. So, in terms of that, I have to be grateful to the family that I grew up in, and I think it's just a thing in the 60s and the 70s that if you grew up in that period of time, the radio was on in the house as an automatic thing.
Yeah.
That was how we sort of broke the silence, if you like. The radio was something that sort of communicated something that was not part of the communication. It was part of the wallpaper, if you like. So, I'm so thankful that I grew up in that era of
Oh, yeah.
things being relatively new, the technology of the transistor radio. If you think about it, a lot of these songs that we listen to, they were only listened to out of that little transistor radio with it's tiniest thing you're ever going to hear, man. You know what I mean? But that's how
Yeah.
people listen to music.
And crackly old medium wave as well, with it floating in and
It's
out as well on Radio Luxembourg. Going the
absolutely
signal.
weirdly enough, we made a video in the Gambia in the 80s, and when they got wind of us shooting the video, the local radio station had said, "Oh, come on our show," and so we're there, and there's nothing else to do apart from shoot the video, and kind of we were like, "Yeah, okay, let's go down," but it was Radio Caroline had washed up, the boat had washed up in the west coast of Africa, and they'd taken all the gear out of it, and that was, and it was like, I mean, I'm kind of a bit too young to admit, but I knew what Radio Caroline was. I mean, anyone that was in the UK, man, you know what I mean? If you were born in
Um,
the mid-60s, you knew about all these pirate stations, and that's what they were. It was a boat
yeah. Yeah.
travelling on the sea, and because they didn't have a license, they could they broadcast. So it's really quite an amazing story, and it just shows the power of music as well. It was like, well, it wasn't being used anymore, but it washed up in this African shore, and the guys like, we can use this, man, and they bring it in, and it's crazy, man, but it was and there we go, we're coming right back to where it started again, doing this full circle of, I'm talking about the acoustic set, the acoustic show, and the fact that what you're doing ultimately is you're taking people back into your bedroom when you were 17 and sort of playing the guitar and showing them this is what happened. This is how it happened. And, we're here nearly 40 years later, still kind of talking about these things
No,
that
I know,
sort
it's
of were
incredible.
created back then. And to me, I feel blessed that we're able to do this.
I mean, you mentioned the number 40. I suppose we have to include the fact that obviously Pop Tin Sold Out, the album that really started it all for you properly, is 40 years old next year, isn't it?
It is, man. But how crazy is that? I mean, somebody texted me and said, how can that possibly be, man? All our friends, because it was our first album, man, and we'd sort of spent, I mean, it's such a small space of time, but we'd spent 2.5 to 3 years basically putting it, well, in fact, it was more than that. Some of these songs were 5 years old. Angel Eyes had started off as a ballad. We then speeded it up, and then when it got to the album, we slowed it down again.
And
You know
again,
what I mean? So these songs had went through the whole different genres. Oh, can we do this way? And so, this was the thing. This album of Popped In Sold Out was the culmination of all our kind of inspiration and all our kind of work that had been to that point. And, you know, it was just such a, for an 80s band, for us to have a bit of vinyl or a cassette. This was pre-CDs days, remember, you know. So there was vinyl and there was cassette. So it was analog. But it was this tangible thing that we held in our hands. And, you know, in a way, it sounds like an antiquated world, you know, almost like your little transistor radio, you know. But it was our world back then, you know. It was everything. And to have that kind of, we just felt, oh, we're here forever now. Nobody can take this away from us. It's something that, you know, we can, when I'm old and nobody wants to know, I can bring it out and show people. And this is what we did when we were 20, you know. So in a sense, you know, it went way beyond that. It kind of went out and did all these things. And that's when you start to try, you know, nobody's kind of more analytical mind than me about, right, what's going on here? Why are people buying into this? What's going on? And, you know, you analyse it to death, and sometimes that gets the better of it. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're trying to connect these tones and connect it to the people, and sometimes they embrace it. Usually it's the ones that you don't expect that come up and sort of take you by surprise, you know, the ones that you, oh, this is the best song I've ever written. This is just, wait till people hear that. And then you play it to them and you're sort of excited about the response, and they go, it's quite nice, man, yeah. What about the Labour Party? And sort of, you know, suddenly you're, no, hang on, we need to go back here. And of course it doesn't connect in the way that you expect it. And that's why, that's the beauty of music. It never does what you think it's going to do. It always surprises you. And that door got opened back when we made Popped In Sold Out, and I can't close it no matter how much I try. And no, listen to the new stuff, it's like, no, you cannot, you know, it's just a door that's open and it will never shut.
No, but the thing is, though, without Popped In Sold Out, you may not have been sat here now. I mean, you couldn't have imagined back then that you'd still be sat here 40 years later, actually still playing and still performing and still touring and still being as big as you are. You just couldn't have imagined that it would have the impact that it's had, really, or the longevity that it's had, for that matter. Because you think when I started in radio, if I'd have been playing songs that were from the same time span ago as Popped In Sold Out now is, I'd have been playing songs from the Second World War. It's just crazy, isn't it, when you think of it like that?
I think that's a very human thing, because I think, you know, 40 years, and I'm like, yeah, 40 years from 1987 would be 1947. You know, so that, as you say, you know, you're kind of coming out of the war. So time is a funny thing. It's an incredible, you know, the fact that these things still kind of resonate today is, well, one, they need to be good, I think, you know, that's why we kind of, the contextual idea of the Beatles, kind of, you know, they're 50 years, so I mean, they're the First World War, right? Yeah. If you go back from there, man, you know, so in terms of that, that's a head scratcher. But I think the power of music and sort of, you know, the longevity, you don't get me wrong, it was kind of something that, you know, was in the back of our mind, you know, if you can create something. And you must know the same. I can see all your albums and all your CDs and all your music around you, man, you know. So you've grown up in this era that's sort of, you know, it's something that's really quite important to us, you know what I mean? It's something that, you know, with the advent of time and sort of the new technology that's came along, something that hasn't changed is the longevity of a song and how it's played and how it's received. And we've sort of got to that threshold, I think, where in the sort of 80s, now I'll contextualise this with Love Is All Around. When I heard the Trogs version of Love Is All Around, it's almost like listening to it in a transistor radio, you know. It sounds very tinny, and I'm not downgrading, I'm not, you know, downplaying the technology that was around then, because the technology that was around then was great. It just moved fairly quickly from the 60s to the 80s. And technology then, you know, really took a hold, and you could make just the sonics of the technology became better. And so that when I heard that Trog song, the reason that I kind of thought, oh, this is a good idea to do this, was because I knew it would sound better. You
Yeah.
know, maybe
Yeah.
it wouldn't be as better a song as what they'd done, but it would sonically sound better and it would kind of go in the airwaves better. I knew that the radio stations, you know, the compressors that you guys use and all that, it would sound great on there, you know. So, in terms of that, you know, although the technology moved quicker, I don't think this the idea of a song has moved any quicker, or
No.
we've got to a place now where we're like, oh, songs are better now than they were back in the day. If anything, songs are much more simpler and much more binary than they were back then, you know, because you listen to the Beatles and they're going everywhere in a song, you know. It's not
Oh yeah.
that
Yeah.
there is a sort of template that they use and a sort of structure, but melodically, man, it's all over the place, man, and that's part of its charm and its beauty as well. The fact that they created these things, that's what was driving me as well. I hooked up with a guy who was like, he loved the Beatles much more than I'd ever even paid attention. So the fact that he was kind of telling me about this thing, I was like, I need to go and kind of recheck this, because all I know was she loves you, ooh, 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 you know, and sort of, you know, I saw the Beatles as something that wasn't what I, you know, it turned out that the Beatles weren't what I thought it was at all. You know, when I started to dig in, you were like, they're everywhere here. They're going all over the place. And that was just a massive window and door opening for me as well. Because you're like, you're trying to emulate what McCartney and Lennon and George Harrison were doing and Ringo, and getting it all wrong, and then, you know, coming up with something that was like, well, it's not quite what we started out doing, but it's all right, you know, it's kind of moving in a nice direction, you know, by total accident and not by design at all, we created our own sort of sound, if you like, you know. So, I mean, the
Indeed.
Beatles, yeah, for me, they're everything in music, you know. They're
Yeah.
everything. And, you know, you know, McCartney's still doing it. And, you know, as we
He is.
said,
I know. Fair play to him. Fair play to him.
it's
Because Ringo
amazing.
just
It's
done a new
amazing.
album as well. It's interesting you should mention "She Loves You," because my older sister's 8 years older than me. Massive Beatles fan she was at the time, and "She Loves You" was a song that she played over and over and over again. And apparently, as a toddler, I would refer to a record player as a yeah yeah box because of "She Loves You," yeah yeah, and
Yeah.
it was a square red dansette thing that she had,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And
the things that went on them were yeah yeahs. So yeah,
there you go, man. That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it shows
yeah,
even back then, right? Before you know anything about anything, it's somehow going into your psyche. And that's what is beautiful about music. You know, you can try and analyze it, but ultimately it comes down to the child kind of going, I want to hear the yeah yeah music, and everyone knows exactly what you're talking about. Okay, that's
exactly,
shove the Beatles
exactly.
on, man. You know,
Yeah,
so it's a great story.
yeah. That and things like that will never change, will they? Music will
Yeah,
always have an impact on people.
aye.
Greg, I could sit here and talk to you all day. We normally do chat for ages and ages and ages anyway, but I know you've got other bits and pieces you need to get on with, including of course rehearsing for the tour, because that's not that far off now, is it? It starts
No,
Wednesday the 13th in Carmarthen, and then comes down to Barnstaple on the 14th to the Queen's Theatre, and then you're off to Aldershot and then King's Lynn and then back up to Scotland again, aren't you? So
that's right. That's right. So, listen, it's great. All these places, all these towns that we know,
mm,
but we don't necessarily go there, you know. We've got the chance to go there, you know.
yeah,
Some of them won't be that great, but let's face it, people have got to come from places, you know. And also, I came from a place that Barnstaple, or, you know, you mentioned Aldershot, you know, Paisley, which is just like Paisley's where the airport is. We grew up in the flight path of the flights coming in, so we're just across the Clyde. Paisley is like the bigger brother town of
yeah.
Clydebank, you know, and so, you know, as I said at the beginning, we are coming full circle right back to where it started. So, listen, it's such a privilege. Thanks very much, Dave, for having me.